Yeah. Hello everyone and welcome to Prototyping in Figma. I'm Vivian and I'll be one of the hosts for this workshop.
And I'm Hannah, and I'll be helping host this workshop as well. Our previous host unfortunately had a emergency come up, so we'll be taking over. So just be patient with us. Yeah.
So design thinking. So for the design thinking process, there are five main stages. So there's emphasize, define, ideate, design slash prototype, and test. And today we'll be focusing on designing slash prototyping. Um, so yeah, what is a prototype? A prototype is a draft version of a product that allows you to explore your ideas and show the intention behind a feature or the overall design concept to users before investing time and money into development. So we'll dive into prototyping a little later.
But just to give a quick overview for now, so this is what it would look like if you're prototyping in Figma. So on the right-hand side, you can see that we're currently in prototype mode. And from there, you can start making connections between screens. So for instance, you can connect an element, for example here, to another screen. And from there, you can start changing the interaction between them. So sort of on this right-hand side in this toolbar here, you're able to change the kinds of ways they interact with each other. Maybe you want to have the screen move in or dissolve in, things like that. And you can be pretty technical with how you change it. And again, we're going to go through a little demo later in the workshop, but this is just a preview.
So why prototype? Since design involves far more than just the designer these days, like there are engineers, marketers, project managers, and other stakeholders that collaborate with designers. Um, we need to like officially work together, and to do so, we rely on prototypes, which are high fidelity representations of an app to communicate about a mockup before it's shipped to engineers. So yeah, more specifically, why do I have to prototype? It's to get your ideas down, validate your ideas since you can actually test your prototypes, and then you can, yeah, and then before building your actual product. And then this definitely saves on time and costs that could be spent on fixing things you could have caught with your prototype before spending all that money on development. And then, so there are three types of fidelities for prototyping: low fidelity, mid fidelity, and high fidelity. And we'll briefly go over each one. So for low fidelity, so this is like very simple prototypes. And the pros of this is that you can document ideas early. It's very quick to make, like only a couple minutes, and it's easy to iterate. And also you can get feedback quickly from your team members or other stakeholders. But then the cons of this is that users may get caught up in the lack of completeness by like how rough your sketches look. And it's also a little harder to communicate ideas since it's not properly like designed out. So yeah, this is like an example of like a low fidelity prototype. You can see it's just like a rough sketch of like some phone screens. There's more of it on paper, and then you can see like, oh, um, there are like specific tasks that explain what each part is like supposed to do. Yeah, so again, pen and paper is a great tool for low fidelity, but you can also use Marvel, which is a application specifically for low fidelity prototyping. And in this slide, you can see like what it looks like, how to use it. So, and in the app, you can like edit your sketches a little more and then link the screens and to create some interactions. For mid fidelity prototyping, this is also pretty like quick and cheap or compared to high fidelity prototyping, and it's very easy to test and easy to iterate through. And instead of like, as we saw with low fidelity where it was on paper, mid fidelity is typically translated into like a digital environment. So like a tool of your choice, like Figma, Sketch, etc. But the cons are that it's like still not exactly like the final product. There's still like a couple of components missing, and then like interactions themselves might be limited. So users can't like fully go through your application. So yeah, here are some mid-fidelity tools. We have Sketch, which we're sponsored by, and you guys can potentially win a Sketch license if you're first place or you win in the raffle. And then there's Figma, which is a free tool, and I think a lot of designers use it. There's also InVision, and then there's Adobe XD. And then for high fidelity prototyping, so this is like the closest rendering of your final product. Like everything should be pretty much fleshed out in detail. It's a lot easier to test since everything's there and like all the iterations and interactions are there. And it captures your ideal visual styling. And it also can be used to communicate with developers, like trying to see if this is like actually going to work with whatever tech stack they're working with. And then some cons of this though are that there's a higher learning curve because there's so much work to like work on and it's not as quick. And it's hard to iterate on. So it should be the last version on an iterative cycle before development. And it's also very difficult to make it pixel perfect between like different screens.
All right, so now that Vivi sort of outlined the different kinds of prototyping, I'm again going to dive into what that really looks like in a design software. So we're going to be using Figma here as an example. So again, just to be a bit more clear what prototyping would really mean in a design software, usually that means designing the transitions between the screens. And so this is just bringing your design to life and make things more realistic to the viewer. And again, this would be done by linking frames to each other by using transition behaviors. So for example, move in or push or slide, those are different transitions that you can set for each screen. Okay, so again, there's many different types of interactions. I believe across design softwares, there's pretty set standard ones, but here you can see some examples on Figma. For example, you can set an interaction to be like tap or drag or even while the user is hovering or pressing. So you can get pretty technical into the kind of interactions that you design there. And then you can also animate those transitions. So whether you want something to be instant after someone like selects something or clicks something, you can also make something dissolve, move in, move out, push, slide, etc. And Figma has a cool thing called Smart Animate, which has a bit of a learning curve to use, but it essentially helps make your designs flow in a lot easier. And okay, so now for a quick demo in Figma. Okay, so you guys can still see this, right? So currently I'm in a Figma file. And these are just a couple of really basic screens for like a loading and login sort of flow. So just to start with the basics, here you can see that we're currently in prototype mode, which you can see here. So from design to prototype. And then this is already sort of prototyped out, but I'm just going to walk through it. So what you see here is like the play button and the flow number 1. So that's really where the flow is going to start. And you can actually move this button to be on like a different screen if you want to, but I'm going to keep it here since that's where the flow starts. And so here you can see a screen I've selected, and on the right hand side, it then populates the interactions that you've set for it or you're about to set for it. So in this case, we already designed out the interaction, and the interaction here is going to be a delay. So if you select this, you can read more about the details. And here I've set the delay to 800 milliseconds. And after 800 milliseconds, that's when it will navigate to the next sort of screen or the destination of this arrow. And I also set the animation to Smart Animate. And so you'll see it when I play the demo or play the prototype, but it'll basically ease in a really smooth way. Okay, and then so from this screen, you go to this one, and here you can see that the interaction I've set is tap. So basically what this means is that if you tap anywhere on this screen, it'll then move to the selected destination. So in this case, if I tap the screen, it'll move over here. And then from there, the next interaction that we set is to have a keyboard appear. So how does that work? You see, if you select the interaction here, you can read more of the details. So it basically means that on tap, it'll open this keyboard overlay, and that's what it says right here. And you can even set like the specifications for how it'll appear. So we want it to appear on the bottom center. We want it to move in, from the bottom, and we want it to move in 300 milliseconds. And to learn more about prototyping, you really just have to play around with it. A lot of these things, like, you don't have to change. I think they're already preset, but it's nice to start with the basics, and then from there you can sort of change things up to make it how you want it. Okay, and then how we set it after the keyboard, if you keep following the, the little arrows here, you see that after a delay, it'll then navigate to this screen. And so how I set it, it's 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds. And after 5 seconds, it'll then populate this. And basically what that shows is the email address and password being filled out. And so again, prototyping is just a really nice way to sort of bring your designs to life, even though it's quite more simple than how it actually would be in real life. Like, I'm not showing them like me typing out the email address or password, but it shows like on a pretty high level, like what the design would look like in action. And so it's really helpful when you're trying to present your designs to, stakeholders or other designers. And so I'm gonna show like what this whole flow looks like. So how you do that is you press the present button there and make sure you're on the flow that you want it to be. Okay, so yeah, you already saw there after a delay, like it was a pretty short delay, but after a delay, it went from the blank screen to this screen that has our design UCI logo on it. And then remember that if I tap it, if I select it, it should move to the next screen. So, okay, there, you saw that there. So now it's on the sign-in page. And again, the next interaction is if I tap it, the keyboard will appear, or it will slide in from the bottom. And it happened. Okay. And now I think it's after a delay. Yeah, there we go. After a delay, it populated the email address and password. And so that was it for the demo. Again, pretty simple, but there are some things that you have to play around with. I think the best way to learn is just to practice, and there's a lot more like tutorials and demos like online that you could find. Okay. And so just a really quick note, that demo I showed was pretty basic, but there's some other things that you can do to make your prototype and interactions even more realistic. One of those being scrolling. So this is really relevant when you have overflow content, and there are different types of scrolling. So there's vertical scrolling, there's even horizontal scrolling, and you can even do both sometimes. And so in order to do this, you place elements in a frame and define the boundaries. We have some examples in that Figma file that we're going to share later, but I'm not going to get into right now, but it's pretty simple, and it really helps, again, to make your designs come to life. Okay, and that was it for this workshop. If you guys have any questions, let us know. Again, sorry if that was like a little rushed, but I hope that still conveyed good information to you guys.